All right, how's everyone doing? I'm Rich CELENZA. Thanks for tuning into the Rich CELENZA Show. WTF are you talking about? So, what I want to get into today is, does your identity match who you hang out with? And I know a lot of times we grow up and we've heard our parents saying, whoever you hang out with or whoever you're around, you're going to become, and you want to be around the best people possible because people judge you by who you hang out with, and blah, blah, blah. Which there's definitely, there's a lot of truth to that. There's no question about it. And especially when you're younger, you can be influenced by a lot of good people or bad people. And truthfully, a lot of times our parents can be good or bad people as well. Our siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, it goes on and on and on. So I always say those are the people influencing you. And sometimes as a child, you have no other choice but to be with these people. So I had an uncle that was a drug addict that ended up in the joint for most of his life and one of the top leaders in gangs. But when I was with him, he was a very nice guy. My father despised him, though. That's just one example I'm using. And then I had other uncles that were extremely, I'm not going to say extremely, but very wealthy, that lived unbelievable lifestyles. So I had opposites from the fullest on both sides. And I also grew up in that environment, having a massive Italian family. I also had a lot of cousins, again, uncles, more or less, involved with a lot of things that were bad. Some going in and out of the joint. Some ended up drug addicts, alcoholics. Actually, a lot of them. Some of them homeless. Some of them murdered. Some of them just having a lot of bad situations. Then on the other side, I had, again, a bunch of other uncles that were very successful businessmen, smart. And basically all I was surrounded by was Italians. That's all I knew. I don't think it was my mother's fault. She was such a young woman when she had me. And my grandmother was such a young woman as well. And then I had immigrant grandparents from Italy. And that's all we knew. That's all I knew. It wasn't like open season kind of to a certain degree. We were from Italian neighborhoods. Then I went to a suburb. But I was mainly around Italians. Some even from the town of Cicero, which I don't know if you know anything about Cicero. It's kind of rated one of the worst towns at one time for organized crime. And then I spent a lot of time in my teens in Melrose Park, which is also known for organized crime. And I'm not dissing on either one of those towns. I love being from there to a certain degree, or being there a lot, because that's where my grandparents basically lived. So here's the thing regarding, I think, identities. When you growing up on kind of who you pick and choose and kind of who influences you, you kind of fall into a category where you feel the most comfortable with whoever it is. So when my mom moved to the suburbs, my closest, oldest friend was Italian from Taylor Street in Chicago. That's the original Little Italy, or at least one of them. And so we gravitated towards one another in first grade, because I used to say they almost treated us like we were, I'm not going to say lower class or anything, but we loved sports, but they were all kind of preppy kids, Midwest from Chicago, in LaGrange, in LaGrange Park, I should say, which is middle class and upper middle class. But we used to go around and say we were like the greaseballs. We were just talking about this when I was in Chicago last week, how people either gravitated towards that or didn't. And it was funny because when I was in the suburbs, they would call me, names like greaseball, Dago, Wop, me and him, whatever. And then when we went to like Taylor Street or Melrose Park or Cicero, it's funny, they would be calling us preppy kids or suburb kids and kind of make fun of us on the other end. So it was a very interesting dynamic growing up in those environments. But what was nice is I got to see a lot of different sides. And also with my family, one side of my family being from a more, I don't want to say lower middle class, but a rougher, tougher guys, Italian guys. And then on my other side of the family, my father's much more, I guess you could say, artistic, flamboyant, wealthier. I used to call that side of the family the Kennedys, the Italian Kennedys, because they all had beautiful cars. They had summer homes. They had places in South Florida. So I learned in my life, and then including my dad's bar business and nightclub, and then my mother going on to bartend as well, I learned how to, balance all different types of people coming in my life that I don't think a lot of other people had the opportunities to have. Especially my mother and father getting a divorce at a young age. Now, I know divorce is very common now, but in the 70s, especially early 70s, it wasn't. So my mother would work, and I'd get to spend time with all my different aunts, uncles, cousins, friends, all different people. If my mother was working, she was a single woman. So, working a lot to take care of me, and she wanted to stay in a very nice suburb. So, I mean, I really appreciated that, and that was very interesting. But what I want to say is, in these environments, I was around a lot of bad people and good people. And as I grew up, I gravitated towards the same. I didn't always want to be with a certain type of person. I still don't, I guess you could say, or fall into a certain clique. When I used to visit my buddies in college and they joined a fraternity, I never felt more kind of like get away from me. And that's not because frats are bad. Frats seem pretty cool to me. But it seemed kind of designed where, you go in and you meet all these guys you really don't know to a certain degree. Some you may know, but you become a fraternity and brothers and blah, blah, blah. I looked at life more as judging people on a growth, like how much do I know about their past, and how did I grow with this person? That's where my trust came in. It wasn't almost immediately. Like all of a sudden you're in college, you're meeting a bunch of new guys. Even team sports I played my whole life, like the first year or whatever, you're kind of feeling each other out. But as you grew as a squad is what brought us in together. And I think a lot of people get raised within a certain environment and they don't either give other people an opportunity or they're not open-minded enough, which is understandable because that's just what you grew up in. So if you grew up in a middle class or upper middle class, you're stuck within your own, and I don't blame you. The last thing you want to do is get wrapped up with criminals, or the last thing you want to do is get wrapped up with drug addicts, alcoholics, whatever the case may be. But I've done podcasts on this with parents. I don't care how you raise your kids to a certain degree, even though they may not gravitate towards those type of people, those people may gravitate towards them. So, and that's where I think a lot of people sometimes end up in bad spots with their kids because they think their kids, the way they raised them the best they could. They're going to go out and, not do a lot of bad things. But the truth is a lot of good people do a lot of bad things. And actually a lot of bad people do a lot of good things too. Don't kid yourself. But when you match up a lot of people's identity, a lot of people's identity is paired up with who they hang with. And I don't mean like the teams you like. So I have a lot of family members, friends. We all like the Chicago Bears. We like the Cubs. We like the Blackhawks. We like the Bulls. We all get it. I'm saying the way we live our lifestyle. Now, I lived a very interesting lifestyle for most of my life with my father owning a nightclub and then me working in the vending business and then me going kind of into the film business because all these things kind of were very opposite, but actually had a lot in common. And what it had in common was, I think more than anything, is one, socializing, bullshitting, eating, drinking, and drugs, truthfully. That's really what a lot of the bar nightclub business is, as you know. But if you get into the entertainment business, a little bit I realized too, what worked for me with that was they like to party, socialize, small talk, meet up, getting social gatherings. Even when you're making a film, for instance, it's make-believe, but it's about controlling a certain environment. And what's interesting is me being in the nightclub bar business and having tons of people coming at you or you doing all these different things was almost like being on a set because you have all these different things, especially if you're directing a film. So you're kind of conducting all this shit going on. And even if I'm in a bar and nightclub, I'm not necessarily managing the bar or whatever, but again, you have a lot of loud music, there's drinking, there's people coming at you, there's dancing, there's all this excitement. And I learned that they both are very similar from that. And then after you make a film, you got to market it, so you got to get out there and do all these different things. If you got to raise money, you got to talk, meet people again. Where are you going to meet them? Restaurants, bars, nightclubs, maybe a coffee house. It all falls in that realm of entertainment. And a lot of people that I think that I grew up with, or even through my 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, they were a lot of great people, but a lot of shady people, especially balanced between Chicago and Florida. And most of my closest friends in Florida, for the most part, are all New Yorkers. Most people thought I was from New York when I was in Florida. I hung out with a bunch of different guys. And I was the only guy from Chicago, and literally everybody else was New York except one guy from Florida. And then there were a couple other guys that I hung out with that were more redneck guys, they called them, from Florida, that we worked out with. But mainly it was my buddies came from Chicago, and then some to move here, my cousins and some family members, and then all the other guys were from New York, mainly Brooklyn. So To make a long story short, we got involved with a lot of different things. And sometimes when you look at things in hindsight, like maybe I was the bad influence. And actually, I did a podcast, and I want to do others with my friends, because sometimes you're always judging someone on what their identity is, or how they look like a fuck up, or they're making you look like a fuck up, or they're the ones causing a lot of problems or drama, putting you in bad situations, when you don't want to call yourself out on that. A lot of things that were going down were because of me and my bad attitude, or things that I brought attention to myself. And it took me many, many years to figure out that I'm the problem, or I was a big part of the problem. Especially when we went out, I had some arrests or whatever for fighting. I had a lot of anger issues. I was anti-drugs. I didn't give a shit about drugs. But I was more or less a guy who, when he went out, I don't know why, I was looking for a jam or a beef. A lot of times, it was an arrogance. It was an insecurity I had. And eventually it caused a lot of problems for me financially, hurting others, along with hurting myself at other times as well, and then which also brought more attention on us, especially when we're doing things that weren't necessarily legal, like gambling illegally or booking or doing different things. So one minute I'm telling everybody to keep their mouth shut and do everything on the down low. I'm obviously being shady, and then all of a sudden I'm bringing more attention to ourselves because I'm nuts. I'm not behaving correctly. Now, I knew from the position I was in, with knowing all the bar managers, bar owners, nightclub owners, gentlemen clubs, bouncers, everybody, that a lot of people gravitated towards me. I wasn't stupid, because not only my father knew everybody, but we just knew everybody. So a lot of my friends, I think a lot of people wanted to hang out with me, and I also liked hanging out with them. Each bar owner, or each location, restaurant, whatever the case may be, they have a different agenda. And each one of those people, it could be a manager, bartender, barback, whatever, they all live different lives. Some, like I said, would deal drugs. Some like gambling, so they would gamble through us. Some just like drinking. Some were gay. Some were straight. I wasn't caught up with any of that, judging them that way. It's almost impossible if you're going to be in the nightclub business, or collect money or be in that business. But my point was, when I think of people identities, or like who you hang with, you being judged by them, I 100% believe that. But what I was able to do, I think, more than anyone, or more than anyone I've ever seen, I didn't tie in to them. And I never put myself in a position to let them, for the most part, put me in a bad position. So if I knew a coke dealer, and I knew a bunch, like 5 of the top ones, or 5 of the top 7 at one time, at least in Central Florida, I knew went down, and I was friends with them. But I wouldn't necessarily get in a car with them, not to be an asshole. I wouldn't necessarily go back to a house to party with them. Because in my mind, I'm like, eventually they're going to get busted. That was just the way I played it, but I was still friends with them. I would even see them at bars, have drinks with them, sometimes even meet them at nightclubs. And this can go for women as well. Strippers, regular party girls. You like a lot of people, right? I think a lot of times. But you just can't put yourself in a position to hurt yourself. But that doesn't mean, I think a lot of times, you have to judge them or condemn them or shun them. And I'm going to tell you, just from my life, having a lot of family members, especially right now, very close to me. I can't even explain to you how close I have family members that are drug addicts, alcoholics, that are also raising children, that, or doing a lot of things that I find very, very aggravating. Now, I will say, in those situations, I try to keep my distance, but it's still very hard when you have family members, especially very close to your immediate family or through others, you can't avoid. It's almost impossible. But let me get some water here. But if you have a problem, like, or if you're always kind of caught between having friends that are kind of on the fence, they're kind of good or bad, I'm just telling you, you do not have to lose your relationship with them. And I know now more than ever with social media, maybe you take a picture with somebody, right, and say they're bad, or they've done something in the past bad, or they were in jail, or something they did, or whatever the case may be. You don't want to be seen with them, because then you're going to be judged saying this or that. Listen, I believe in second chances, even third chances. It just depends on what that person does. But a lot of people, like I said earlier, they get caught up with finances, I think, a lot of times. And they do steal, they manipulate, and that goes for so many people, I can't explain it. In my past, I realized some of the people that I thought were going to end up in jail or in the worst spots in their life actually ended up being very good parents and very good friends. And I've also had a lot of people that I thought were great human beings, had their shit together, that ended up honestly becoming drug addicts, alcoholics, or their life fell apart, or they're in the joint for embezzlement, or they pulled so many scams. I've even had friends where their wives went to jail. I've had friends that are girls that their husbands or boyfriends go to jail. I have that actually going on right now in my life, with some very close family members as well. And for people to constantly be judging them and saying they're not going to be in your life anymore and all that shit, I think that's kind of ridiculous. But again, that doesn't mean you're going to ever allow that person to take advantage of you. I think that's where people get caught up with it, is letting their defenses down. The only people that are going to burn you in your life most likely are the ones closest to you, because they're the only ones that are near you to get the opportunity, which you probably know that already. But a lot of times people, like I said, they do make mistakes. And a lot of times you got to look at yourself sometimes, that you may have done a lot of things in your past, or you may do things in your future, or something may happen, or something happens where you could end up at a really bad situation. And I know you may not believe that, but that could go for getting a DUI. It could go for you getting in an altercation with somebody, hurting someone. You can, who knows, you could lose your temper. You may be in a position financially where you take a risk, you lie on paperwork, all these things. Because I truly think no one is perfect. Very few people I know live a perfectly straight and narrow lifestyle. They're most likely, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, most likely you have done things in your past that you're probably ashamed of, that a lot of people don't know about. Some may. And just like them, or just like you want to be forgiven. And I think when you build relationships with all different types of people, or give people the opportunity to at least listen to you, or you know that you kind of have their back, or that you may not be best friends with them, but just giving them the satisfaction of listening to them goes a long way. And when I hear a lot of people that commit suicide, or a lot of times that do a lot of things that are horrific to a certain degree, I think sometimes they just get casted out. Again, this is just my opinion. Or they get shunned, and after a while they retaliate. And again, these are just my opinions, but sometimes those people are reaching out. We're just not there always. Now again, and I've been through this too, I've had a lot of family members and friends, colleagues that end up drug addicts, alcoholics, where you just have to say, you got to go. You have to get away from me. I get that as well. But sometimes before it even gets to that point, you may have friends, family members, again, that are reaching out. And really just pay attention to all the signs, because one day you may be that person reaching out. No one, I think, really, for the most part, wakes up or at 5, 7, 10, 12 years old and says, I want to be an alcoholic, or says, I want to have a gambling addiction, or I want to be a drug addict necessarily. Even though I do think there are other people that can work as a functioning alcoholic. They can function doing drugs for many, many years, especially a lot of musicians that I used to know are artists. And I find it quite funny that if you take somebody like, let's just take, I don't want to start naming names, but some famous bands, and a lot of us know they've been on drugs for many, many, many years, right? And they are cherished and worshipped for their music and for who they are and kind of what they do, which is fine. And a lot of people would love to meet them, love to hang with them, whatever the case may be. They'll give them the pass, but say someone in your neighborhood who's kind of cool, smokes some weed, does drugs here and there, is a musician. You're like, hey, he's a junkie, or he's a drug addict, or he's this or that, or you kind of put a label on him. It's kind of weird how that is, right? Because sometimes I think it only has it's your relationship's based on what you want out of it a lot of times. You're not always looking at it from what the other person is looking at you. But back to your identity, matching up with whoever you're around. I get a lot of people too say, hey, I want to be a millionaire. I'm only going to surround myself with millionaires. That's fine too, if that works for you. In my opinion, though, when you do something like that, hopefully it works for you. But I think learning from all different people, I call it kind of like I heard once Dog the Bounty Hunter say, you not only need to learn the streets, you need to learn the alleys. And I thought that was one of the smartest things I've ever heard, because a lot of people think they know the streets, but they only know their streets, right? A lot of people don't realize how much they can learn from all different people in all walks of life. And a lot of the smartest people I've ever met are not the wealthiest. And a lot of the happiest people I've ever met in my life also are not the wealthiest. They have figured out a balance. And I think a lot of people, especially wealthier people, they kind of, and I get, again, wealthy people have to a certain degree, keep their distance from a lot of people, because people could say something that they did or didn't do, and then all of a sudden they're getting sued in that. I get that. But for the average Joe out there, realize people are people, and everybody, for the most part, I think at one time or another needs someone in their life to do whatever it may be. It could just be a discussion. It could be to help them find a job. It could be to help them do whatever. And a lot of people don't have those people. If you have the opportunity to help others, especially that are having a problem helping themselves, I think that truly shows who you are. I really do. And, I think we all know people around us, most likely, that need our help right now, and we kind of neglect them. And again, I'm not telling you to go out and help drug addicts, alcoholics, gambling addiction, or whatever the problem is, sex addicts. I'm not telling you to do that. But what I am saying is a lot of times you may have had older friends, is what I should say, or you have friends now, and they could be going through a divorce. They may be in jail. They may be on probation. They may be whatever the case may be. They may have gotten a DUI and need to be picked up and dropped off. Just try to help, because a little help goes a long way. And I think by matching up our identities that way, and that's what I've always tried to do, is help even if they're hurting. And I don't care if my friend's car's broke down and I'm in town, I will text them continuously and say, hey, dude, if I'm going this way, or you need to be picked up, or I'm not saying I'm Mr. Help you 24 hours a day, but I do want to help. And I even created an app called the You Around, which is an app to help anyone in a time of need, because I'm always hearing people saying they need help, but no one, a lot of times, is available to help them. I think a lot of people want to help people, they just don't know when that person needs help. But anyways, I just thought I would do a podcast on this, because I think a lot of people get scared of being seen or becoming friends with people that may not always be exactly like they are. But I'm telling you, I had to break out of that too, because really all I hung out with my entire life were Italians. And then as time went on, when I moved to Florida and I met other people, including one of my close friends could be Cuban, one's a Floridian. Like I said, there's a couple other guys from all over. And as time grew, I'm like, it's not even that you're against any other person from any other city or state or anything. It was just something a lot of times I think we're all programmed with. Me being Italian may have been a little more, if I grew up, that was just who I felt comfortable with. And as far as my inner circle goes, it's still that way to a certain degree, but I still was open-minded to say, hey, I need to meet other people. I have to be more open-minded. And I'm not so caught up with if I'm with this person at this time hanging out or friends with this person that everybody is looking at me and saying, wow, he's just like that person. Because if people truly know who you are, they know you're genuine, and they know who you are. You don't have to worry about everybody else. You're friends with somebody saying you're just like that person, right? And if they do, shame on them. It's ridiculous. So, alrighty. So I'm going to wrap it up there. If you guys get a chance, you could check out my all my stuff on richcelenza.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram as well. If you could leave a comment. I have a YouTube page on that. I actually just put up a video today on Nutella Cafe in Chicago. I think there's only 12 in existence, but if you like Nutella and you're in Chicago, they actually have 2 locations that are really extreme. One's in Italy, and one's at Nutella Cafe on Michigan Avenue. So that's pretty cool. And on my YouTube, I put a bunch of different things regarding fitness, different gyms I visit, different Italian restaurants or locations, and many other things. So I'm going to wrap it up there. Take care, and if you're traveling, safe travels.